Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to have you join us today for the Navigating the Enhanced PIMS website training for scholars. This session will be recorded and posted on the PIMS within the next couple of weeks. So if you would like to revisit the training, you can. Note that we do not allow AI agents to attend, so those will be removed. We do have ASL and CART services available, but please let us know if you have any trouble accessing these during the training. You can use the chat or the Q&A functions within Teams to be able to ask questions. If you're unable to access the Q&A, you may use the chat. Our staff will try and answer these questions, and we will communicate any important information from these questions to you after the training, including typing up a list of questions and their answers in the Scholar Resources page on the website. If we don't get to all of the questions today, our team will review and compile the questions and post a resource on the PIMS. I'd like to take a moment to have us all introduce each other since we have a few different presenters on the call today. My name is Sarah Whitman. I am coordinating the training and resources for the new Enhanced PIMS. I'd like to kick it over to Muriel.
Hello, my name is Muriel, and I am one of the help desk specialists.
And Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia, and I am also a help desk specialist.
And Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Bloom, and I am the RSA program coordinator.
Thank you all. And I'd like to also just welcome Rivka and Laura, our ASL interpreters. Thank you for supporting us today. So our objectives for the session today. First, we're going to be introducing you to the redesigned PIMS and provide a demonstration for common tasks. We're going to discuss Scholar workflows and associated requirements. And finally, share where you as users can find additional resources and information on the new site. Throughout this session, we will show you recorded demonstration videos that you will also be able to access after the presentation on the PIMS. It may feel intimidating to use the new site, and while the enhanced PIMS interface looks different, the core RLTT requirements have not changed. Most updates streamline existing workflows rather than introducing new responsibilities. And I will note, we do have that we have heard from some folks, depending on your screen size, it can be a little difficult to watch the demonstration videos. We will be posting those separately from the recording. And so if you'd like to revisit those after the training, you can be able to watch those on your own. This is a quick overview of the scholars' involvement in the RLTT program. Scholars are expected to meet with their university's project director to discuss the training program and expectations. Then the scholar and their project director will both sign a payback agreement when the scholar enrolls in the training classes. When the scholar either completes or exits before completing the training program, they and the project director will again both sign the exit certification. Finally, the scholar will then fulfill their service obligation or repay the scholarship monetarily. Here is a legacy system you may be familiar with, and here is the new system with a new website. We've included the URL on this page. It is pdp-rsa.ed.gov. We ask that you please save this link as the previous PIMS is no longer available to you. Don't worry though, all data from the legacy system has been moved over and tested within the new PIMS. If you go to the old website, you'll be redirected to the new PIMS. PIMS now requires the use of login.gov to access the enhanced system. This is a secure government-wide authentication platform, and you may have already used it for things like Social Security or global entry. Because we're moving to login.gov, you will no longer to request account reinstatement. I will note, and we'll talk about this in a couple of different points in the presentation. If you do have issues with login.gov, the fastest and easiest way to get your concerns with login.gov addressed is to contact login.gov directly, and we'll share that information in a later slide. To access PIMS through login.gov, you'll need to use your PIMS email address. But don't worry, you don't need a pre-existing login.gov account to get started. If you already have a login.gov account under a different email address, you have two options. You can either create a new account using your PIMS email, or you can link your existing PIMS email address to your existing account. We have step-by-step instructions on how to link your emails on the user training and resources page. Because passwords are now managed through login.gov, you need to go through login.gov to reset or change your password or to update multi-factor authentication. And again, for that, you'd be contacting help through login.gov, not the RLTT help desk. On the next slide, we'll show you how to access PIMS through login.gov and either your existing email address or by creating a new account.
Welcome to this quick guide on how to access the RSA PIMS using login.gov. This video will walk you through two things: how to create a new login.gov account and how to sign in using an existing login.gov account. Start by going to the PIMS homepage at pdp-rsa.ed.gov. You'll see a login button on the right-hand side of the screen. Go ahead and click that. On the next screen, you'll see a login button again. Click it and you'll be redirected to login.gov. You're now on login.gov. This is the federal government secure sign-in service. Click Sign in with login.gov to continue. If you don't have a login.gov account yet, here's how to create one. From this page, click Create an Account. Enter the email address associated with your PIMS account. This is important. Your login.gov account must use the same email address as your PIMS record in order to link it correctly. Once entered, check the box to agree with the terms and conditions and click Submit. Login.gov will send a confirmation email to the email address entered. Open your email and click Confirm Email Address. If you don't see a message within 5 to 10 minutes, check your spam or junk folder. The link in your email will take you back to login.gov to create a password. Make sure you create a strong password that meets login.gov security requirements. You'll see guidance on screen about what's required. Once you've entered your password, click Continue. Login.gov requires two-factor authentication every time you sign in. On this screen, you'll choose your preferred method or methods. Explanation of each method are shown as well. Select the method that works best for you and follow the on-screen instructions to complete setup. You can also add a backup method for extra security. Once you complete the multi-factor authentication, click Submit. You will be redirected back to the PIMS. If you already have an existing login.gov account, I will now show how to log in with your existing PIMS associated email address. On the PIMS, you will click Login on the main screen and then Login again, which will take you to login.gov. Here you will sign in with the same email address that you use in PIMS. Simply enter that email address and your login.gov password. Note, this is your login.gov password, not your old PIMS password. Then click Submit. If you've forgotten your password, click Forgot Your Password and follow the steps to reset it. Login.gov will send you an email with a link to change your password. Click that link, which will take you to this page, and you can enter your new password. Then click Change Password. You will then enter the email address and password associated with your account and click Submit. Complete the multi-factor authentication. And then you'll be redirected back to the PIMS. Welcome to this.
All right,
Michelle. Turning it to you, Marielle.
thanks. So now we're going to talk about scholar enrollment in PIMS. Scholars and project directors must both sign a payback agreement, or also known as PA, to enter the scholar into PIMS. This can be done digitally or via PDF upload. If signing digitally, your project director will initiate the agreement in PIMS. So here's an overview of the digital agreement process for the payback agreement, and we will show a more detailed demonstration of the process shortly. Grantees will initiate and fill out the payback agreement and then send it to the scholar through the PIMS. Scholars will receive an email notification that there is a new PA awaiting your review, and if all the information in the payback agreement is correct, then the scholar will sign the agreement and submit it back to the project director. If a scholar disagrees with any of the information in the digital agreement, they should leave a comment in the message log. This will notify the PD so that they can make the changes and then send it back to you for another round of review. After the scholar signs, the PD will be able to review and sign the agreement. Once that is complete, they will then be able to create your scholar account. So Scholar's main job during enrollment is to complete the training program. You should still be logging into PIMS regularly to confirm that all information is accurate and update contact information if necessary. Scholars are expected to sign a new payback agreement for each year of funding. So essentially, you'll be receiving that request for each year that you accept funding. If you have exited from or completed your training, you are no longer receiving RSA funding. Your university is expected to update this information in PIMS within 30 days. Please remind them or reach out to the help desk if you notice that this has not occurred. Okay, number 3. All scholars and their project directors must sign an exit certification or EC to officially exit the scholar from the training program and allow them to fulfill their service obligation. This can be done via digital signature or also PDF upload, similar to how the payback agreement is done. The EC is also a legally binding document, so it's important you review the form carefully before signing it. Once the EC is signed by both the scholar and the project director, the scholar can begin fulfilling their obligation through service. And here's the digital exit certification process. It follows the same workflow as the payback agreement. Your university will initiate that exit certification, which is pre-filled from the information from your scholar record, and then it'll be sent to you for review. If you agree with the information, you can sign that exit certification and send it back to your project director. And if you would like to make changes, like if your name or birth date are wrong, then note that in the message log and send the form back to the PD to revise. Once signed, you can begin fulfilling your obligation through service or monetary repayment. And now we're going to have a demo of the digital agreement process. And after that, Michelle will go over the service obligation requirements.
This is a video demonstration for RSA scholars showing how to sign digital agreements. As an RSA scholar, there are 2 important forms you'll sign electronically in PIMS during your time in the program: your payback agreement when you start and your exit certification when you finish. Both of these are legally binding agreements. Process to sign both forms is the same for scholars, but there are a few key differences between the 2. Let's start with the payback agreement. Your university or project director will create your digital payback agreement or PA in PIMS. They will fill in all the required fields and submit it to you for review. You will then get an email letting you know your PA is ready for review. That email will instruct you to access the PIMS through login.gov using your PIMS associated email address. If you have not set up your login.gov account yet, you'll be able to do so when you sign into the PIMS. After you log in, you'll be able to open and review your digital PA. Take your time reading through it, especially the terms and conditions, which list the program requirements for enrollment and service obligation. Once you're done reviewing, you have 2 options: agree or disagree with what your university submitted. If you agree, you will type your initials in the certification box and then type your full name below in the signature text box. If you disagree or you notice something that needs to change, you can edit specific fields in Section A or Section B. For security reasons, certain fields and all of Section C are locked and can't be edited directly. If you need to make a change in Section C, you can use the message log at the bottom of the page. Here is where you can describe the requested edits. You'll see a pop-up indicating that you can no longer sign the agreement. Click OK. You can type your message in the message log, or if you need to make any edits in Section A or B, once you start typing or making changes to any fields in Section A or B, you will also see a pop-up message that you cannot sign the payback agreement yet, and you will need to detail the changes in the new message field before submitting the agreement. When you are satisfied with your message, you can click Send to Grantee for review. This will notify your university that you have requested changes to the payback agreement. They will review your feedback and revise the PA accordingly before sending it back to you to look over again. Once you approve of the agreement, you will digitally sign the PA and submit it back to your university. To sign your name, add your initials to the scholar certification and then type your name in the scholar signature text box. Click Accept and Submit. After your project director signs the payback agreement, you will receive a notification and you'll be able to access it from the PIMS under Agreements. This is where you'll be able to download it as a PDF for your records. Now let's fast forward to the end of your training. When it's time to exit your program, you'll go through a very similar process, this time for your exit certification or EC. But before we get into the steps, it's worth knowing there are actually 3 different versions of the EC, and which one applies to you depends on how you're exiting the program. EC Form 1 is used if you graduate or receive a certificate of completion. EC Form 2 applies if you withdraw voluntarily or involuntarily after completing at least 1 academic year. And EC Form 3 applies if you withdraw before completing 1 academic year. If you are using the digital EC, PIMS will automatically populate the correct form for you to sign. To access your digital agreement, log into the PIMS and click on Agreements, and then click on Exit Certification. Now here's how the signing process works. Just like the PA, your project director or university will create the digital EC, fill in the required exit fields, and submit it to you. You'll get an email to log in and review it. Make sure that you review the exit terms and conditions to make sure that they align with the expected version of the EC that you are planning to sign. If you agree with the information in the EC, you'll electronically sign the EC and submit it to your project director for their countersignature. If you disagree or something needs correcting, you'll propose those changes in the message log. Same rules apply as with the PA. A message means you're not signing yet, and signing means you're confirming everything is accurate. You will not be able to edit any fields within the EC, so if anything needs changes, please describe these in the message log. If your project director does make changes, you'll get another email with a link to review and sign the revised version. To sign the form, type your name in the scholar signature box, and then click Accept and Submit. Once you and your project director have both digitally signed, you're officially exited from the training program. And the signed EC is available to download from the agreement section of your Scholar record. I am going to go over the service obligation requirements. So what is considered eligible employment to fulfill your service obligation? Scholars must work for a state or federal vocational rehabilitation program, such as a state or federal VR agency or a related agency that has a formal or informal agreement with the state agency. A related agency may include another federal or state agency, a nonprofit organization, or a for-profit professional corporation or professional practice group focused on independent living. These scholars may work as a consultant or practitioner serving rehabilitation clients under an agreement with the state VR agency. The position must be in the field of study for which the scholar received their training, and it cannot be a volunteer position. It must be paid. Scholars who complete doctoral programs may work in related agencies providing education, training, or research support as long as the Institution of Higher Education, or IHE, has an agreement with the state VR agency. These positions must align with the specialty area for which the scholar studied during the RSA-funded training. The position may include supervising students, providing direct instruction, advising or consulting work, or conducting research. Scholars may not work for an IHE in a solely administrative role or as a graduate assistant. Federal regulations require all RSA scholars to work 2 years for every 1 academic year of funding received to fulfill their service obligation. For example, if you receive 1.5 academic years of funding, you will owe 3 years of service obligation. For part-time scholars, this obligation is calculated proportionally based on the actual academic years of funding received for training. A scholar who completes half of an academic year during 1 calendar year will owe 1 year of service obligation for that amount of funding. Each individual institution determines the length and credit requirements of an academic year. Please contact your project director if you are looking for how your university calculates academic years. RLTT program requirements allow for a grace period for scholars when they leave their training program before they must begin fulfilling their service obligation. The grace periods can be a little bit confusing, especially if you have received multiple RLTT grants, so we created this chart to help explain it. The main idea is that scholars who graduate or complete their training will receive 1 2-year grace period that cannot be repeated. If you complete a training program from a second grant, you will only receive a 30-day or 1-month administrative grace period. If you do not graduate or complete your training program, you will also only receive a 30-day or 1-month administrative grace period, regardless of the number of grants you received. And unfortunately, if you exit the training program voluntarily or involuntarily before completing 1 academic year, you will not be able to fulfill your obligation through service. How do you calculate your service obligation deadline? The PIMS will automatically do this for you, but the formula is shown on this slide. You'll take the date that you exit or complete the program, add the amount of time for your grace period, plus the amount of service obligation that you owe. For example, if you graduated today, meaning you had 2 years of grace period, and as part of your program, you owed 1 year of service obligation, your deadline to fulfill your obligation would be 3 years from now, or July 21st, 2029. Calculating deadlines for multi-grant scholars is a little more complicated. The deadline to fulfill the obligation for your second grant is based on the deadline to fulfill your obligation from your first grant, regardless of the exit date from your second grant. This will continue for each subsequent grant using the most recent grant's deadline as the start date for the calculation. And I know this is a little bit confusing, so if you have received multiple grants and you are confused or want some clarification about how to calculate these deadlines, please contact the help desk. Similarly to how part-time funding is calculated, part-time employment is calculated proportionally based on the number of hours a scholar works per week. For example, it would take a scholar working 20 hours a week in eligible employment twice as long to fulfill their obligation as a scholar working 40 hours a week or full-time. Depending on your service length, part-time work alone may not be enough to fulfill the obligation before the deadline. One thing to note, PIMS does not require scholars to work 40 hours to be considered full-time. The position must be considered full-time by your employer and needs to be at least 30 hours a week. Now I will pass it back over to Marielle to talk about deferrals, waivers, and repayment.
Thanks, Michelle. So scholars can request a deferral of obligation or repayment after exiting their program. There are only limited circumstances that allow RSA to grant a deferral, and the following are enrolled full-time at an IHE in the field of rehabilitation. So that's one of the reasons. If you're serving on active duty in the armed forces of the United States up to 4 years, serving as a Peace Corps volunteer or a full-time volunteer under Title I of the Domestic Volunteer Service Act of 1973. If you're temporarily totally disabled, that is up to 3 years, or if you're caring for a disabled spouse, partner, or child, or the need to accompany a spouse or partner on active duty in the armed forces. While you are within the active deferral, you will not be able to enter employment to fulfill your obligation through service. Scholars are required to submit documentation with the specific dates for each deferral request. Documentation may include an official transcript or proof of enrollment with the expected graduation or completion date, and that is for if you're enrolled full-time, or medical documentation indicating that the scholar is unable to work in eligible employment that has been obtained within the past 3 months. Scholars may request an exception to bypass monetary repayment or their service obligation requirements if they are unable to continue their current training program or unable to complete their employment due to a permanent disability. Scholars must provide medical documentation to support this claim that includes a statement that a reasonable work accommodation cannot be made. A disability in and of itself is not sufficient to serve as the basis of the waiver. A scholar's disability must have worsened since entry into the program of study, or they must have acquired additional disabilities for a waiver to be granted. Lastly, a waiver of repayment is also available in cases where a scholar has died. Documentation to substantiate this waiver must include a death certificate or other evidence conclusive under state law. So requesting a deferral or waiver. Deferrals and waivers are not automatic, so they must be officially approved by RSA. To request a deferral or waiver, you'll need to log into PIMS into your account and scroll to the bottom of your Scholar account to find the deferrals and waivers section. Then you'll click the yellow request a deferral waiver button. Fill out the form indicating the reason for the deferral or waiver and the specific timeline. And you'll also be able to upload your supporting documentation, and then you can click submit. So for monetary repayment, there's some circumstances in which scholars will enter repayment, and there are 3 reasons. First, if the scholar did not complete their training program or at least 1 academic year of the training program, scholars will automatically be referred. That is a requirement. Second, if the scholar does not have enough verified employment in PIMS to fulfill their service obligation by the deadline to complete. And third is if a scholar chooses to enter repayment on their own, which we also call voluntary repayment. Scholars enter repayment when it is clear that they do not have enough eligible employment entered or service obligation credit accrued to fulfill by the deadline. However, if an RSA scholar partially fulfills their service obligation, they will repay a prorated sum based upon the remaining amount of unmet obligation. For example, if a scholar fulfills half of their obligation through service before entering repayment, they would only be required to repay half of the monetary scholarship amount received. And when an RSA scholar is submitted for repayment, a formal letter is sent to the scholar from RSA requesting a response. And if you'd like more information about this process, you can find the steps detailed in the FAQs on the PIMS website. And once you're ready to fulfill your service obligation, you'll see that there's a service obligation status shown on your scholar record. So this chart depicts the key aspects that affect each service obligation status. You can find more detailed definitions for these statuses in the Checking Your Service Obligation Status resource under Scholars Resources on the left-hand sidebar. So just to go over the statuses, awaiting login and awaiting completion indicate that a scholar is still enrolled in the training program. The other 9 statuses mean the scholar has exited from or completed their training. Service obligation in progress means that you have some service obligation credit and you are still within the timeline to fulfill by the deadline. Repayment review indicates the scholar's grace period has expired and the scholar has not obtained sufficient verified employment to fulfill their obligation. In repayment means the scholar has been notified of the debt referral and is in the process of repaying monetarily. In deferral means the scholar has an approved deferral. Waiver approved means the scholar's debt has been canceled due to the death or permanent disability. And obligation fulfilled or fulfilled through cash means you have completed your obligation. And I'll now hand it over to Sophia.
Thanks, Mariel. So now we'll be going over submitting employment. To receive service obligation credit, scholars must create an employment record in PIMS and have their employer verify their work. After clicking Add New Employment Record, you'll be prompted to enter the information on this slide. So the employment record asks for your employer name and address, supervisor and or HR manager's email address and contact information, the type of organization, dates and hours of employment, your job title, and a description of your duties. The information you enter into your employment record will be reviewed by both your project director and other grant staff at your IHE and your employer. You can choose whether to send the record to your supervisor or your HR manager or both, but only one of them needs to complete the verification. If there have been any changes to your position, such as an updated title, revised job duties, or a new job entirely, you will need to create a new employment record. First, you'll need to resubmit your current record, indicating that it is no longer your current position, and add an end date. Then you'll be able to create and submit a new employment record for your next position. The PIMS does not allow for overlapping employment records, so if you have any part-time employment that may overlap with your full-time employment, you'll have to contact the help desk in order for it to be submitted. Going over the employment submission process. So what is the process to submit an employment record and obtain service obligation credit? Scholars are responsible for submitting their employment information at least every 6 months in the Payback Information Management System. The first step is to create and submit a new employment record. Some of you who may have created employment records in the legacy system should see those records reflected in their account. You won't have to recreate those. If you don't see them in the system, please let us know. You can email or call the help desk. Once you have created a new employment record, if needed, this will trigger an email to your project director and to review and approve the eligibility of your employment. Your project directors will have 15 days to indicate whether they agree or disagree that the position meets the RLTT service obligation requirements. If they disagree, PIMS will email the scholar and provide a link to review the grantee's explanation for disapproval. You'll then have a chance to revise and resend the employment record if necessary. If your project director approves your employment, the system will send your employer a verification request. Grantees only need to approve your employment record once unless there are significant changes made. Scholars are encouraged to communicate with project directors before accepting a position to discuss whether their employment is qualifying. Further, because many state VR agencies have established relationships with universities, your project director and staff can assist in the employment verification process with employers. Employers will then access the PIMS to verify or dispute the employment record, which we will explain in the next slide. The scholar will receive an email once this is complete. If verified, nothing else is needed until you resubmit the employment record to your employer in 6 months, or if you change positions. If the employer disputed the record, the scholar will need to go into PIMS and review the dispute message. You can then revise and resend the record back. So, one quick note, if you make any substantive changes to your employment record after it has gone for employment verification, for example, if you changed your job title, the description of your duties, or your organization type, this is when it'll go back to your project director for review. Moving on to the employer verification, what does the employer see when verifying employment? So the email to your employer will contain a link to the PIMS with an automatic login applied, so they won't have to create an account. They will then review the information the scholar entered in the employment record and agree or disagree with each item. If they disagree, they will need to provide an alternative answer and an explanation. Calculating the service obligation credit. So this is how scholars will accrue service obligation or service or SO credit. The PIMS is designed to award SO credit to scholars for verified employment only. This is because we don't know if you've continued working in the same position after your employment record is verified or if you left the next day. This means that the service obligation credit will not continue to be applied beyond the date of your employer's last verification. To continue receiving credit to fulfill your service obligation, you will need to submit or resubmit an employment record every 6 months until your obligation is complete. If you've gotten your employment verified and are working in the same position 6 months later, you can simply resubmit the same employment record. As indicated on the screen, you will only receive a portion of your SO credit even if you've been working in eligible employment for longer if you don't submit your employment record again. Resubmitting will ensure that you receive your service obligation credit for the entire time that you've been working. And now we're going to view a demo regarding how to submit your employment record.
Hello and welcome. This video demonstration will show you how RSA scholars can submit employment information in the PIMS to fulfill their service obligation. We'll walk through the steps to add a new employment record, address any disputes, and how to resubmit your record down the road. Let's get started. Before you can submit an employment record, 2 things need to be true. First, your scholar record needs to show an exited status. Your university handles that step, so reach out to them if you have questions. Second, you need to have either completed or graduated from your training program or completed at least 1 academic year of it. Let's add your first employment record. Start by logging into PIMS to access your scholar record. Then you can review your grant funding information and service obligation requirements in sections C and D. If you see any errors or inaccuracies, please contact your project director or the PIMS help desk. Scroll down to section F, Employment. Read through the instructions on that page before you begin. When you're ready, click the yellow button to add a new employment record. Additional instructions are located at the top of the page. First, you'll need to complete your employer information. This includes the employer name, department name if that applies, and the address, phone number, and website. Next, you'll enter contact information for your supervisor and/or your HR manager. Only 1 contact is required, but we recommend filling in both if you can. For each one, you'll provide their full name, email address, phone number, and work address. Now you move into details about your position, starting with the type of organization. If your employer doesn't fit one of those listed, you can select Other and specify. Next, indicate whether this is your current employment or not. If you select No, you will need to enter an end date for this position. If you select yes, then the end date field will be hidden. Then specify whether your position is full-time or part-time, and if it's part-time, you'll enter weekly hours. If your hours fluctuate slightly, you can enter an average number of hours per week. However, if they change frequently, you will need to create different employment records to accurately capture each position's hours. Next, enter your start date. This needs to be after the date you exited or completed your training program, even if that's not the exact date you started working there. We recommend informing your employer ahead of time that your start date may not align with your actual position start date due to the service obligation requirements. Then you'll add your job title along with your job duties or a description of your role. You can also upload a file describing your job duties, but you must enter at least 500 words in the text box to submit the record. You'll also note whether the position is paid or voluntary, and whether it resulted from an internship as part of your RSA grant-supported training. Remember, volunteer work does not count towards your payback requirement, so this position needs to be paid to be eligible. If this is your first time submitting this employment record, your project director will get an email to review it and confirm it meets eligibility requirements. If they approve it, PIMS automatically sends your selected employer contact, so either your HR manager or your supervisor, a link to verify your employment. Your employer contacts will have 30 days to complete it before the link expires. If your project director rejects your employment, you'll receive an email notification and you'll be able to access the notification on the PIMS Scholar record. Click on the notification and you'll be able to review what the project director noted was their rejection reason. You can then revise your employment record and resubmit it for project director approval. After your project director approves your employment and it's sent to your employer contacts, they can either verify or dispute your employment record. If your employer disputes any part of your employment record, don't worry, you'll be able to fix it. Go back to section F and look for the record highlighted in red with a disputed status. Click the yellow button under the Actions menu and select Edit. There are additional instructions to address a disputed employment record at the top of the page. You'll see the specific questions that were disputed highlighted in red, along with your employer's response and explanation. Update your answers as needed, and then click Resend for employer verification. You'll receive a notification when your employer employment record. You will then see the service obligation credit reflected on your Scholar record as well. Here's something really important. PIMS only credits employment that's been verified, and credit does not keep accruing past your employer's last verification date. So even though this scholar received credit for their service obligation up until today, the PIMS will not continue to award the scholar service obligation credit tomorrow. So to keep your service obligation credit current, you'll need to log back in and resubmit your employment record for re-verification. We recommend doing this every 6 months until your obligation is fully met, even if you're still in the same position. To resubmit your employment record, simply click on the specific record and review the information. If you do not have any changes, you may click Send for Employer Re-verification at the bottom. If you do need to make any changes, like updating your supervisor's contact information, you can update that within the same record. If you change any substantive fields, like your job title or duties, it will need to go back to your project director for re-review. Otherwise, the employment record will be sent directly to your employer to verify again.
All right. We've got a couple questions that I feel like have a little bit of a theme here. Just as a reminder, your employment records do not get resubmitted automatically. You must come into the system and resubmit them every 6 months if you want to see your service obligation update. Additionally, if you have employment that overlaps with each other, so if at any time you have like a full-time and a part-time record where they're happening at the same time, you can create the employment records in the system, but you'll have to contact our help desk to submit them. The system won't allow you. So just as a reminder. All right. moving on to obligation fulfilled. How do you know when you fulfilled your obligation? Your status will change on the PIMS and you'll see there is no more obligation remaining. The system will automatically log your fulfillment status, so there's nothing more you need to do. As a note, if you do have multiple grants, you may still need to continue submitting your employment to fulfill additional grants. The PIMS will automatically apply your service obligation credit to subsequent grants after you fulfill each one. So, yeah, if you're a multiple grant recipient, even if you exited both grants at the same time, your obligation is separate from one another. So you have to fulfill the obligation on grant one. Once you've done that, then any employment that you have will begin applying to your second grant. And that brings us to the resources and support that we have available for you. So resources are available on our website, which is pdp-rsa-ed.gov. There are some scholar-specific resources, including specific steps to complete tasks. There are checklists available, videos, and they're listed under user training and resources under that scholar tab. I would also recommend looking at the resources that are available for all users. We did have a couple questions in the beginning that were asking where you could find step-by-step login instructions. That is found under the resources for all users. We also have our FAQ page that can be found, and this contains information on the regulations, changes to the enhanced system, as well as the operating system just in general. And of course, our help desk is available at 1-800-832-8142 or at the RLTT help desk at ed.gov. Our help desk is available Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we are closed on federal holidays.